likely to survive of everything I've said. After all, I've published now at least 20 million words, so I have to figure it out, maybe even more. But of all those millions of words that I've published, I am convinced that 100 years from now, only 60 of them will survive. The 60 that make up the 3 laws of robotics.
All right.
Lord of the Rings. Let's get into that. You know, we saw this coming. We warned you. We said to you already. Amazon is going to make a shit show out of it. They're going to diversify because the way their diversity is the situation. Oh, we have to have diversity and everything. When they tell you we have to have diversity, that right there is, you got to ring that bell. You got bing, bing. You got to ring that bell and say, danger. You know, you have to sit there with the robot from Lost in Space. Say, danger, Will Robinson. That has always been a danger. And you may say to yourself, well, why? We have to have diversity. Anytime when a movie, TV series tells you, or a business even, we're diverse, that is literally waving a flag. Say, look how good we are. Please praise us. That does not mean it's going to work out. If you're hiring people just for the color of their skin, that is being racist. That, in some cases, depending on the jobs, on situations on there, where you are in the world, in fact, here in the U.S., that violates job requirement rules. State to state and federal. Because when you get hired, you're told, do not look at race, do not look at creed, do not look at color, do not look at disabilities, do not look at sexuality. You know, these are the things that we're told not to look for. And it's the truth. You're getting hired for a job and you're told, I'm looking for someone to replace somebody that, you know, how good are you? What is your experience? What can you bring to the table, you know, to improve this company? What can you bring of your experience to this company? That is what when you get hired for a company, that's what they're supposed to look for. Not because you're Spanish, not because you're black, not because you're gay. You know, that's like saying, well, gee, we have our first gay token. Think of the word token. Tokenism. This is your token. And people will say, well, you don't use that word. You know, Eric July uses it. But it's the truth. And in this case, they've done it here. Because basically you have the Lord of the Rings, the Ring of Power. And originally they said, well, we've done this. It's going to be the Silmarillion, we're condensing the thousands of years on there before the Lord of the Rings tale. We're going to show you what happened prior to that, blah, 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 blah. You know, we saw the variety stuff. And not to get into the Black Elf and the Black Dwarf, which there are issues with that. And that's facial hair and hair itself. That why does the elf have not long hair? And the dwarf doesn't look more male-ish with a beard. And her outfit doesn't look like a dwarf. It looks like something like out of some rich kingdom. Something out of, you know, that's actually, that picture is in Vanity Fair. A stylish outfit. But, well, actually, you know, let's take it from a dwarf himself. From the Peter Jackson Lord of the Rings on what a dwarf is supposed to look like.
It's true you don't see many dwarf women. And in fact, they are so alike in voice and appearance that they're often mistaken for dwarf men. It's the beards. And this...
See, here is Peter Jackson saying, you know, when he did this movie, yes, there were some elements here and there that was missing, which wouldn't have worked out well in the movie version, and that's There's a Hobbit section where the hobbits live was supposed to be destroyed, and they kept that out, and that was supposed to be at the end of the movie, but they never put that in there, and they thought that would have pissed the hell out of everybody, which is okay that was left out. Should have been in there, but hey, listen, just one of a billion things that was in the Lord of the Rings. That Lord of the Rings was an excellent movie. And if you have the unrated version, the director's cut, there are some scenes that have been added back in there, and still it is a great film series. The Hobbit, that's a, I grew up with the Ralph Bakshi Lord of the Rings. Great film there. That should have had a sequel, but the issues with that. Then you had the Rankin and Bass, The Hobbit, Return of the King, which was also very good. They did it for a kid's point of view. In fact, the kid's version was a little scary in itself. And then Peter Jackson was going to do this, and we had some worries. We had our feelings toward the whole situation, but Peter stayed within the book the best he could. In this case, from what they've told us what was supposed to be, now this article's come out thanks to John Trent over at Bounding. Lord of the Rings of Power showrunners admit they don't have the rights to the Silmarillion or the Unfinished Tales. What? Really? Not surprised at it, but really? Here you go, that you've been pushing this for quite some time, that this is supposed to be stories prior of the Second Age. But you don't have the rights to the Second Age. You have the rights to Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit, or what Peter Jackson had, but from a television point of view, because Warner still owns the rights to theatrical. So basically, unless they're going to do it on television to change that around, they can't do it theatrically. They're going to butcher it if they're going to create a new Lord of the Rings, but they can't do it on the screen. They don't have the rights to the story that they're creating. They're taking appendixes from those, what they have, to create this story. That's why this story is all crap. And we already see it. The ages of a lot of the people in this movie are incorrect. The looks of a lot of the characters are incorrect. And there are a lot of other errors, costume designs and stuff. There's some errors in the costume. Ooh, man. There's a scene on horseback where you can see the guy's wearing a boot that is not of that era. It's like the watch in Ben-Hur, like you had a watch. If you ever see the original Ben-Hur, Charlton Heston wore his watch, and it was like, oops. But here you had a rider that just basically was wearing the wrong type of footwear. But let's read this a little bit off from Bounding. The Lord of the Rings of Power showrunners J.D. Payne and Patrick McKay admitted the show does not have a number of rights that depict the events from the Second Age of the Lord of the Rings world. Speaking with Vanity Fair, Payne revealed that they only have the rights to the Fellowship of the Ring, the Two Towers, the Return of the King, the Appendixes, and the Hobbit. He stated, "We have the rights solely to the Fellowship, the Two Towers, the Return of the King, and the Appendixes, and that's it. We don't have the rights to the Silmarillion and Unfinished Tales, the History of Middle-earth, or any of those other books." One wonders why in the world would someone endeavor to bring a live action of the Second Age when you don't have the rights to the key materials that document the Second Age. Well, McKay has the answer. He says the version of everything we need for the Second Age is in the books. We have the rights. No, you don't. This is flashbacks. The appendixes and all that are just basic flashbacks or discussions of what happened in the past. You don't have the full story. As long as we're painting those within the lines, egregiously contradicting something we don't have the rights to, there's a lot of leeway. No, you're destroying the leeway. And room to dramatize and tell some of the best stories that Tolkien ever came up with, he added. Listen, I'm not the great Tolkien scholar myself, but I've read the books. Not the Silmarillion, I haven't started yet, but from what I understand from my friends, they said basically there's a lot of you have thousands of years of the stories of the history of Middle Earth in many different novels, and Amazon is trying to condense that into a season or a couple seasons or two, which is totally wrong. Despite the show not arriving on Prime Video until September, the show's first trailer, initial images first published in Vanity Fair, reveals they've already egregiously contradicted those books. They turned Galadriel into a commander of the Northern Armies. Incorrect. That basically she's not a commander of the Northern Armies. The Northern Armies was created by King Ollinder. See, and that's the other thing in the trailer. They said before the king. But there were kings in Middle Earth in the time period they're depicting. Before what king? What king are you fucking talking about? Are you talking about the king at the end of the Fellowship? The return of the king? Is that what you're talking about? Because you're not being specific on there. And led him when he defeated Gondor from the invasion by the Wain Riders of Rohan. Ondor created his northern armies and used it to defending against the Wain Riders, was detailed in the Unfinished Tales. Galadriel was not a commander, although she took it upon the dwarves also the eye of the commander, seeing them as the finest warriors to pit against the orcs, as Tolkien noted in the Unfinished Tales. There is a difference between being a commander and looking upon someone with the eye of a commander. However, before he wrote that Galadriel was more farsighted in this than Celeborn. Excuse me. And she perceived from the beginning that Middle Earth could not be saved from the residue of the evil of Morgoth, had left behind him by a union of all peoples who were in their way and in their measure opposed him. She isn't leading the forces into the battle as the trailer depicts. One would think if she would previously did. She would have done so in The Lord of the Rings as well. Instead, she plays a very different role as a guide and ally as the queen of the elven realm of Lorien, that is what the book has done. The show also introduces us to a dwarf princess named Disa in the Appendix A. Tolkien wrote Disa is the daughter of Thrain II. She's the only dwarf woman named in these histories. It was said by Gimli there were very few dwarf women, probably no more than a third of the whole people. And like you saw in the video before, Gimli had said, dwarf women look like the men. She does not look like a dwarf female. The Witcher had more of a closer dwarf female. Even though it was still, she looked female, dwarf women don't look really like women. They look like the males. You've seen adaptations of dwarfs throughout the years in many different other movies, which they made the females look, even though they kept the beards, but they made them more feminine. But understand, they live underground. Their clothing are very ragged and torn, and more toward miners type situations. And they could not be told apart from the men versus the women. Disa does not look like any other dwarf the show featured. Another clear, egregious contradiction. Nevertheless, Payne and McKay once again showed their hubris and pride that they could do Tolkien's story better than Tolkien. I have to stop right there. That is major hubris.